I thought I had the perfect marriage, a successful husband, a beautiful home, and the kind of life that looked flawless from the outside. But everything shattered with 5 innocent words from my 7-year-old son. Should I tell Mom about last night? The way my husband's coffee mug slipped from his trembling hands told me everything I needed to know about the woman with blonde hair who'd been visiting our house while I slept. What he didn't realize was that his betrayal had just awakened something in me, something patient, strategic, and utterly unforgiving. By the time I was done, he would discover that the quiet wife he'd taken for granted had orchestrated the most devastating revenge of all. Walking away with grace while he watched me rebuild a life that was infinitely better without him. They say the best revenge is living well, but sometimes it's letting the person who broke you see exactly how much happier you are once they're gone. If you're watching this story unfold, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're from, because you're about to witness how an underestimated woman turns betrayal into the ultimate comeback. The morning light filtered through our kitchen windows like honey, casting everything in that golden glow I'd always loved. I stood at the counter, slicing strawberries for Marcus's lunch, listening to the familiar sounds of our morning routine. The coffee maker gurgled. The shower upstairs turned off. My 7-year-old son hummed softly at the breakfast table, swinging his legs under his chair. This was my favorite time of day. Before the world demanded anything from us. Before phones started buzzing and schedules took over. Just the 3 of us in our quiet bubble of home. Mom, can I have the dinosaur juice box today? Marcus asked, not looking up from the picture he was drawing with his orange crayon. Of course, baby. I smiled, reaching into the pantry. Everything felt so normal, so safe. David's footsteps came down the stairs, and I heard him humming too. That was new. He'd been doing that a lot lately, humming, whistling, seeming lighter somehow. I thought it meant he was happy. That work was going well. That we were good. I should have known better. Good morning, beautiful family, David said, appearing in the doorway. His dark hair was still damp from his shower, and he wore that gray suit I'd bought him for his birthday last year. He looked like everything I'd ever wanted. Successful, handsome, mine. He kissed the top of Marcus's head, then came around the island to kiss my cheek. His cologne smelled different. Expensive. I made a mental note to ask him about it later. Morning, I said, finishing Marcus's lunch. You've got that board meeting today, right? David poured himself coffee, already reaching for his phone. Should be home by 7. Marcus looked up from his drawing. Dad, why do you work so late now? I felt something shift in the air. Subtle, but there. Like when the weather's about to change and you can feel it in your bones. David's hand paused over his phone. Work's just busy right now, buddy. You know how it is. But Marcus tilted his head the way he did when he was thinking hard about something. But you didn't used to work late on Tuesdays. Tuesday's just another day, son. I watched this exchange while wiping down the counter. Something in David's voice sounded careful, like he was choosing his words. Can I ride the bus today? Marcus asked me, apparently done with his questions about David's schedule. Sure thing. I'll walk you to the stop. We moved through breakfast like we always did. David read emails. Marcus ate his cereal with the focus of a scientist. I packed the last of his lunch and checked the weather on my phone. But something felt different now. Like a song playing slightly off key. I should probably head out soon, David said, standing up and straightening his tie. Marcus put down his spoon, his little face scrunched up like he was working up courage for something big. Dad? Yeah, buddy? Marcus glanced at me, then back at his father. Should I tell Mom about last night? Time stopped. David's coffee mug slipped from his hand and crashed against the kitchen island. Dark liquid splashed across the white granite. His face went pale, then red, then pale again. The silence that followed felt like a living thing, heavy and breathing and dangerous. "What about last night?" I asked quietly, my voice somehow steady, even though my heart had started racing. Marcus looked confused by his father's reaction. "You know, Dad, when you left with the lady who smelled like flowers." The world tilted. David started talking fast. Too fast. "Marcus, buddy, you were dreaming. Remember? We talked about this. Sometimes dreams feel real, but I wasn't sleeping," Marcus said, his voice getting smaller. "I got up to get water, and I saw you by the front door. You had your nice shoes on. And the lady was there. She smelled really good, like flowers in Grandma's garden." I looked at my husband, really looked at him. His hands were shaking. His mouth kept opening and closing like he couldn't figure out what words to use. "Honey," he said to Marcus, his voice strained. "You must have been sleepwalking. Kids do that sometimes. Your mind makes up stories when you're not fully awake." But Marcus shook his head. "I was awake, Dad. I know I was awake because I was thirsty. And I saw her touch your arm. She was pretty. The kitchen felt too small suddenly, too bright. I could hear everything too clearly, the hum of the refrigerator, David's quick breathing, the tick of the clock on the wall." "What did this lady look like?" I heard myself ask. David shot me a look, sharp and warning. "Maya, he was dreaming. Kids mix up. She had long yellow hair," Marcus said, warming up now that someone was listening to him instead of telling him he was wrong. "And she wore a blue dress, a really pretty one. She whispered something to Dad, and then they left together." "Marcus," David's voice was firm now, with that edge he used in business meetings. "That didn't happen." But I was watching my son's face. Marcus didn't lie. He was one of those kids who couldn't keep a secret if he tried, who wore every emotion right there on his sleeve. And he looked confused now, hurt that his father was telling him his memory was wrong. But Dad— "Enough," David said. "You were dreaming. That's final." Marcus's bottom lip trembled. He looked at me with those big brown eyes that were so much like mine. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab David by his expensive suit and shake him until he told me the truth. I wanted to cry and throw things and demand answers right now, this second. Instead, I walked over to Marcus and smoothed his hair. "It's okay, baby," I said softly. "Sometimes grown-ups have to go out for work things, even late at night. Right, David?" David's relief was visible. His shoulders dropped. His breathing slowed. "Right," he said quickly. "Sometimes I have to meet with clients. Boring business stuff." But Marcus wasn't satisfied. The lady wasn't wearing work clothes, though. She was dressed up pretty, like for a party. The silence stretched again. I kept stroking Marcus's hair, but I was watching David, really watching him. The way he couldn't quite meet my eyes. The way he kept touching his wedding ring, spinning it around his finger. The way he looked like he might throw up. "We should probably get going," I said finally. "School starts in 20 minutes. David nodded too enthusiastically. "Yes, absolutely. Time to go, Marcus." But as we moved through the motions of leaving, gathering backpacks, finding shoes, grabbing keys, I felt something hard and cold settling in my chest. I'd been married to David for 8 years, been with him for 10. I knew his face better than my own. I knew when he was excited about a new project. I knew when he was worried about his mother's opinion. I knew when he was lying, and he was lying now. Marcus climbed into his car seat, still looking troubled. "Mom, was I really dreaming?" I buckled his seatbelt and kissed his forehead. "What do you think, sweetheart?" He considered this seriously. "I think I know when I'm awake. I think you do too." In the rearview mirror, I watched David's car pull out of the driveway behind us. He was on his phone already, talking to someone. His face looked tight, stressed. The drive to school was quiet except for Marcus humming again. The same tune his father had been humming this morning. Happy and light, like everything was normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. I walked Marcus to his classroom, kissed him goodbye, and watched him join his friends at the reading corner. He was smiling again, drawing dinosaurs with that same intense focus he'd had at breakfast. Children moved on so easily. Adults were the ones who held on to things, who turned them over and over in their minds until they grew too heavy to carry. I drove home slowly, taking the long way through our neighborhood, past the perfectly manicured lawns and the houses that all looked like ours. Big, expensive, safe. This was the life I'd built with David. The life he'd promised me when we got married. I'd been 22 then, fresh out of college with my teaching degree. David was 24 and already making a name for himself in tech. His parents had money, old money, the kind that came with expectations and rules I was still learning. We'd met at a coffee shop near the university. I was grading papers. He was working on his laptop. When his computer crashed and he lost 2 hours of work, I was the one who offered him my table when my laptop bag knocked over his coffee. "I owe you more than coffee," he'd said, and his smile made me forget about the papers I was supposed to grade. 6 months later, he proposed. 2 years after that, we were married in his parents' backyard garden. It should have been perfect. It had been perfect. For a while. But sitting in my car in our driveway now, I couldn't shake the image of Marcus's confused little face. The way he'd looked when his father told him his own memory was wrong. I thought about the humming. The new cologne. The way David had been staying late more often, coming home with stories about difficult clients and demanding meetings. I thought about how he'd looked when Marcus asked that question, like someone had just told him his worst fear was coming true. My phone buzzed. A text from my sister Jasmine. "Coffee later? I have stories." I almost laughed. If only she knew the story I had now. Instead of responding, I sat in my car and tried to remember the last time David and I had really talked. Not about schedules or Marcus's school or bills, but really talked. The way we used to when we were dating, when he'd tell me about his dreams and I'd share mine. When had we stopped doing that? When had he started humming again? When had I started feeling like a stranger in my own marriage? I closed my eyes and tried to picture the woman Marcus had described. Long yellow hair, a blue dress. Pretty enough that a 7-year-old would notice. Wearing perfume that smelled like flowers. Someone who was comfortable enough with my husband to touch his arm, to whisper to him, to meet him at our front door late at night. The cold feeling in my chest spread. I thought about confronting David when he got home, demanding the truth. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the teacher in me, the part that had learned to watch and listen before acting. Maybe it was the mother in me who knew that sometimes the whole truth was worse than not knowing. Or maybe it was the part of me that already knew the answer, but wasn't ready to hear it said out loud. I got out of the car and walked into our house. Everything looked the same as when I'd left it 30 minutes ago. David's coffee mug still sat in the sink where I'd left it. The newspaper was folded on the counter. Marcus's orange crayon lay next to his placemat. But it all felt different now, like I was visiting a museum of my old life. I picked up David's mug and rinsed it out, thinking about how he'd dropped it when Marcus asked his innocent question. How his hands had shaken, how quickly he'd tried to cover with explanations and excuses. A woman who smelled like flowers. I dried the mug and put it back in the cabinet. Then I did something I'd never done before in our 8 years of marriage. I went upstairs to our bedroom and opened David's dresser drawer. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. Evidence, maybe. Or proof that I was being paranoid and jealous and foolish. But underneath his socks, I found a receipt. Dinner for 2 at Romano's downtown. Last Tuesday. The expensive place we'd never been to because David always said it was overpriced. The receipt was dated 9:30 p.m. David had told me he was working late that night, said he'd grabbed a sandwich at the office. I sat on our bed holding the receipt, thinking about Marcus's words, about Tuesday nights, about a woman in a blue dress who touched my husband's arm and whispered secrets in our front hallway. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jasmine. "Hello? Earth to Maya. Coffee or no coffee?" I looked around our bedroom, at the pictures on the nightstand, our wedding day, Marcus as a baby, family vacations where we all looked happy and real, at the books on my side of the bed, at David's expensive suits hanging in the closet. This was supposed to be my safe place, the place where I belonged. So why did I suddenly feel like an intruder? I put the receipt back exactly where I found it and closed the drawer. Then I went downstairs and texted my sister back. "Coffee sounds perfect. I definitely need coffee." Because suddenly, I needed to talk to someone who would tell me the truth, even if it was a truth I didn't want to hear, even if it meant admitting that my perfect life might not be perfect after all. But first, I had to figure out who my husband really was, and whether the woman who smelled like flowers was the reason he'd been humming again, whether she was the reason he looked so happy, whether she was the reason I'd started feeling so alone. Jasmine was already at our usual table when I walked into Cafe Luna, stirring sugar into her latte with that focused intensity she brought to everything. My sister had always been the practical one, the nurse who dealt with real problems, real pain, real solutions. While I taught children about fractions and phonics, she helped people heal. I needed healing now, even if I wasn't ready to admit how badly I was broken. "You look like hell," she said without looking up from her coffee. "Good morning to you too." I slumped into the chair across from her, grateful for her honesty. Jasmine never sugarcoated anything. "I'm serious, Maya. When's the last time you slept?" She studied my face with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "And don't tell me you're fine. I can see the stress lines from here." I ordered a coffee from the server and tried to figure out where to start. How do you tell someone that your entire life might be a lie? How do you say the words out loud when saying them makes them real? "David's been working late a lot," I said finally. "Okay, that's not exactly breaking news. The man's always been married to his job." Jasmine took a sip of her latte. "What else?" "Marcus said something weird this morning. Kids say weird things all the time. Remember when he insisted that clouds were made of marshmallows for 3 months? But this was different, and Jasmine could see it on my face. She put down her coffee and leaned forward. "What did he say?" I told her everything. Marcus's question at breakfast, David's reaction, the coffee mug shattering against the granite, the woman with long blonde hair who smelled like flowers. Jasmine listened without interrupting, which scared me more than if she'd jumped in with explanations or reassurances. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think 7-year-olds don't make up elaborate stories about strange women visiting their fathers at night." Her voice was gentle but firm. "And I think grown men don't spill coffee and panic unless they have something to hide." My coffee arrived, but suddenly I couldn't stomach the thought of drinking it. Maybe there's an explanation. Maybe it was work-related and he just... "Maya." Jasmine reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Stop." "Stop what?" "Stop making excuses for him. You're smarter than this." I pulled my hand away. "You don't know David like I do. He's not perfect, but he wouldn't..." "Wouldn't what?" "Cheat." Jasmine's voice was quiet, but direct. "Because that's what we're talking about here, isn't it?" The word hung between us like a live wire. Cheat. Such an ugly, simple word for something that could destroy everything. "I don't know," I whispered. "Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe I'm seeing problems that aren't there. Or maybe you're finally seeing problems that have been there all along." I thought about the receipt in David's sock drawer, about the way he'd been humming lately, about how distant we'd become without me really noticing when it started. "How long has he been working late?" Jasmine asked. I don't know. A couple months? I tried to think back. It started gradually. First it was one night a week, then two, then Tuesday became a regular thing? I nodded, feeling sick. And you never questioned it? Why would I? David's always been ambitious. His company's growing. I figured it was just part of success. I stared into my coffee cup. God, I sound naive. You sound trusting. There's a difference. But trusting felt like another word for stupid right now. I thought about all the signs I might have missed. All the times I'd chosen to believe the easy explanation instead of asking harder questions. What am I supposed to do? I asked. Confront him? Demand the truth? What do you want to do? I considered this. Part of me wanted to go home and pretend this conversation never happened. Pretend Marcus had been dreaming. Pretend the receipt was for a business dinner. Pretend everything was fine. But a bigger part of me was tired of pretending. I want to know the truth, I said. I want to know who my husband really is. And you need to watch and listen. Really listen. Jasmine stirred her coffee again. Men like David, successful, charming, used to getting what they want. They get careless when they think they're safe, when they think their wives won't question them. You think he's taking me for granted. I think he's taking you for granted, and he's probably taking this other woman for granted too. Men who cheat usually do. The casual way she said it, men who cheat, made my stomach lurch, like it was already a fact instead of a fear. I need to get home, I said suddenly. Pick up Marcus, make dinner, act normal. Can you do that? Act normal? I thought about it. After 8 years of marriage, acting normal had become second nature. Smile when he comes home. Ask about his day. Listen to his stories about difficult clients and demanding board meetings. Cook his favorite meals. Laugh at his jokes. I've been acting normal for months without realizing it, I said. I can do it a little longer. Jasmine reached for her purse. Just promise me something. What? Promise me you won't disappear into this. Don't let him make you feel crazy or paranoid or like you're imagining things. Trust your instincts. I nodded, though I wasn't sure what my instincts were telling me anymore. Everything felt jumbled and uncertain. We hugged goodbye in the parking lot, and I drove to Marcus's school with my mind racing. The afternoon pickup line moved slowly, giving me time to think, to remember. Last Tuesday, when David said he was working late, I'd made his favorite pasta dinner and kept it warm until almost 10 o'clock. When he finally came home, he'd seemed different, energized, happy in a way that had nothing to do with successful meetings or closed deals. I'd thought he was just pleased with how work was going. Now I wondered if he'd been pleased with how something else was going. Marcus climbed into the car with his usual after-school energy, chattering about art class and playground drama. I let his voice wash over me, grateful for the normalcy of it. Mom, can we get ice cream? He asked as I buckled his seatbelt. Not today, baby. We need to get home and start dinner. Is Dad coming home for dinner tonight? The innocent question hit me like a punch. I think so. Why? Marcus shrugged. He's been missing dinner a lot lately. I miss him. Out of the mouths of babes. I miss him too, I said, and realized it was true. I missed the David I'd married. The one who came home excited to tell me about his day. The one who helped Marcus with homework and read bedtime stories with funny voices. The one who made me feel like the center of his world. When had that David disappeared? At home, I moved through the familiar routine of snack time and homework supervision, but part of me was somewhere else. Part of me was remembering all the little changes I'd dismissed or ignored. The way David had started keeping his phone face down during dinner. The way he'd stopped talking about his coworkers by name. The way he'd begun showering immediately when he got home, before he even kissed me hello. The new cologne. The humming. The the way he looked through me sometimes, like he was thinking about someone else. "Mom?" Marcus was tugging on my sleeve. "You're not listening." "I'm sorry, sweetheart. What did you say?" "I asked if you're okay. You look sad." I knelt down so we were eye level. Marcus had his father's green eyes, but my ability to read emotions. He saw everything, even when I tried to hide it. "I'm okay," I said. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff." "Boring stuff?" "Very boring stuff." He seemed satisfied with this answer and went back to his math worksheets. But I caught him glancing at me several times like he was keeping an eye on me. At 6 o'clock, I started dinner. David's favorite, chicken parmesan with garlic bread. I moved through the familiar motions of breading chicken and boiling pasta, trying to lose myself in the routine. But my mind kept wandering to the woman Marcus had described. Long blonde hair, a blue dress, pretty enough that a child would notice. I thought about David's type when we'd first met. He'd dated mostly blonde women before me. Sorority girls and debutantes who fit easily into his family's world. I'd been the exception, the black elementary school teacher who didn't come from money or connections. His mother had made that clear at our first meeting. "She's lovely, David," Mrs. Richardson had said over dinner at their country club. "But are you sure she understands what she's getting into? This lifestyle can be overwhelming for some people." David had defended me then. Told his mother that I was the smartest, strongest, most amazing woman he'd ever met. That he was lucky to have me. I'd believed him. Now I wondered if he'd just been trying to prove something to his family. If I'd been a rebellion that had gotten out of hand. If he'd spent 8 years trying to find his way back to what felt familiar and comfortable. If blonde hair and blue dresses felt like coming home to him. The front door opened at exactly 7 o'clock, and David's voice carried into the kitchen. "Honey, I'm home." Marcus dropped his crayons and ran to greet his father. I heard laughter and the sound of David swinging him around the way he used to do when Marcus was smaller. "Smells amazing in here," David said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with Marcus on his shoulders. He looked relaxed, happy, guilty. "Your favorite," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "You're the best." He kissed my cheek, and I smelled that new cologne again. Expensive and unfamiliar. "How was your day?" "Good, quiet. I had coffee with Jasmine." "How's she doing?" "Fine, busy with work." I served the chicken onto plates, hyper-aware of every movement, every word. "How was your meeting?" "Productive. Long, but productive." David helped Marcus wash his hands at the kitchen sink. "We're close to closing the Henderson deal." "That's great." We sat down to dinner like we had hundreds of times before. David told stories about his day. Marcus shared playground gossip. I listened and smiled and asked the right questions at the right times. But underneath the familiar rhythm, I was studying my husband like I'd never seen him before. The way he kept checking his phone even though he'd placed it face down on the counter. The way he seemed distracted, despite his animated conversation. The way he avoided my eyes when he talked about his late meeting. "Dad," Marcus said suddenly, "do you remember last night?" David's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "What about last night? When you left with the flower lady, did you have a good time?" The silence that followed felt dangerous. David's face went through several expressions: panic, anger, forced calm. "Marcus," he said carefully, "we talked about this morning. You were dreaming." But Marcus was 7, and 7-year-olds don't give up easily when they know they're right. "I wasn't dreaming, Dad. I know the difference between sleeping and being awake." His voice was getting stubborn. "She had on a pretty dress and sparkly earrings, and she laughed when you whispered something to her." David set down his fork. "Son, that didn't happen." "But, Marcus," David's voice had that warning edge again. "I said that didn't happen." Marcus's bottom lip trembled. He looked at me for support. I wanted to protect him. I wanted to tell David to stop making our child feel crazy. I wanted to stand up and demand the truth right now. Instead, I reached over and touched Marcus's hand. "Why don't you tell us about art class today?" I said gently. "Didn't you make something special?" Marcus brightened, always eager to share his creations. As he launched into a detailed description of his finger painting masterpiece, I felt David's grateful look across the table. He thought I was protecting him. He had no idea I was protecting our son. After dinner, David volunteered to do dishes while I helped Marcus with his bath. As I shampooed his hair, Marcus looked up at me with serious eyes. "Mom, why doesn't Dad want to remember the flower lady?" I thought carefully about my answer. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings about things. It doesn't mean you're wrong about what you saw. "So, I really saw her? What do you think?" He considered this while I rinsed the shampoo from his hair. "I think I saw her, and I think she made Dad happy, but I don't think she makes you happy." "Smart boy, too smart." "I think," I said carefully, "that you're very observant and very loved, no matter what." After Marcus was asleep, David and I sat in our living room like we did most evenings. He read emails on his laptop. I graded papers from my substitute teaching days. The picture of domestic harmony. Except I couldn't concentrate on anything except the space between us on the couch. When had that space gotten so wide? When had we stopped naturally gravitating toward each other? "Maya," David's voice broke through my thoughts. "Thank you. For earlier, with Marcus." He closed his laptop and looked at me directly for the first time all evening. I know he's confused about whatever he thinks he saw. Kids have such vivid imaginations. I mean, if I was really sneaking around with another woman, do you think I'd be stupid enough to bring her to our house? With our son home? The question hung in the air. Was he asking for reassurance? Or was he genuinely curious about how much I suspected? "I don't know," I said quietly. "What would you do if you were sneaking around with another woman?" He laughed, but it sounded forced. "I wouldn't be. You know that, right? You're everything I want, Maya. You and Marcus. This life we've built." He moved closer on the couch, reaching for my hand. His fingers were warm and familiar, and for a moment I wanted to believe him. I wanted to lean into his touch and pretend everything was fine. But I kept thinking about the receipt in his sock drawer, about Marcus's detailed description of a woman in a blue dress, about the way David's voice had shaken when he tried to explain it all away. "I know," I said, squeezing his hand back. It was the first lie I'd ever told my husband. But as I discovered that night lying awake beside him, it wouldn't be the last. Because if David could lie to me about working late and business dinners and women who smelled like flowers, then I could lie too. I could lie about believing him. I could lie about not noticing the changes. I could lie about being the trusting, naive wife who didn't ask uncomfortable questions. While he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling and planned my next move. Because Jasmine was right about one thing. I was smarter than this, and it was time to start acting like it. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. I moved through my days like an actress playing a role I'd perfected over 8 years. The loving wife, the attentive mother, the woman who trusted completely and questioned nothing. But underneath the performance, I was watching, listening, learning who my husband really was when he thought no one was paying attention. It started with small things. The way he'd smile at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking. The way he'd step outside to take certain calls, claiming they were about boring work stuff. The way he'd started working out more, buying new clothes, caring about his appearance in a way he hadn't since we were dating. I began keeping a mental calendar. Tuesday nights became a pattern. Always a late meeting, always an important client. always home after 10 with stories that sounded rehearsed and explanations that felt too detailed. "The Henderson project is really demanding," he'd say, loosening his tie. "Jim keeps changing his mind about the specifications." "That must be frustrating," I'd reply, kissing his cheek and smelling that expensive cologne that never seemed to fade, even after a long day at the office. "You understand, though. You know how important this is for the company." I understood more than he realized. 3 weeks after Marcus's innocent question changed everything, I made a decision. David announced another late Tuesday meeting, and instead of staying home with leftover pasta and worry, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, to watch Marcus. "Hot date?" she asked with a knowing smile when I answered the door in my best dress. "Something like that," I said. Romano's downtown sat in the heart of the business district, all dark wood and candle-lit tables. The kind of place David and I had talked about trying but never quite got around to. Too expensive for a casual dinner, too fancy for a family meal. Perfect for impressing someone new. I sat at the bar with a glass of wine I barely touched, watching the dining room like I was studying for a test. The hostess seated couples at intimate corner tables. The servers moved with practiced discretion. Everything was designed for privacy, for secrets, for conversations that couldn't happen anywhere else. At 9:15, I saw them. David walked in first, confident and relaxed in his charcoal suit. Behind him came a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Long blonde hair that caught the light. A blue dress that probably cost more than I made substitute teaching in a month. Diamond earrings that sparkled when she turned her head. She was beautiful in that effortless way that money could buy. Perfectly styled, perfectly dressed, perfectly everything. She was also young, maybe 28, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from never having to worry about bills or babies, or whether your husband was lying to you. They didn't see me. Why would they? I was just another woman at the bar, invisible in my suburban mother disguise. But I saw everything. The way David's hand rested on the small of her back as the hostess led them to their table. The way she leaned into him when she laughed. The way he looked at her like she was the most fascinating person in the world. The way he used to look at me. I watched him order wine. Expensive wine. The kind we'd splurged on for our anniversary last year. I watched her touch his hand across the table, her manicured fingers intertwining with his wedding ring. I watched him lean forward to whisper something that made her throw back her head and laugh with pure delight. They looked like lovers. They looked like people who belonged together. They looked happy. I paid for my untouched wine and left before they could see me. But not before I heard her voice, light and musical, saying, "David, you're terrible. What if someone sees us?" His response followed me out the door. Nobody's looking beautiful. Nobody who matters. The drive home passed in a blur. I felt detached from my body, like I was floating somewhere above myself, watching a woman navigate traffic while her world collapsed around her. Nobody who matters. 8 years of marriage. A child together. A life built on promises and dreams, and the belief that we were partners in something meaningful. Nobody who matters. Mrs. Chen was reading on my couch when I got home, her knitting bag at her feet. "How was your evening, dear?" "Enlightening," I said, paying her and walking her to the door. Marcus was an angel, went right to sleep after his story. "Thank you, really." After she left, I climbed the stairs to check on my son. He was sprawled across his bed, one leg hanging off the edge, his favorite stuffed dinosaur clutched in his arms. Peaceful and innocent, and completely unaware that his family was breaking apart. I touched his forehead gently. He stirred, but didn't wake. "I'll protect you from this," I whispered. "I promise." Downstairs, I poured myself a real glass of wine and sat at our kitchen table, the same table where Marcus had asked his innocent question 3 weeks ago. where David had spilled coffee and lied to both of us without blinking. I thought about confronting him when he got home, demanding explanations, screaming about betrayal and lies and 8 years of my life that suddenly felt wasted. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of how he'd made Marcus feel crazy for telling the truth. Maybe it was the casual way he'd dismissed me as someone who didn't matter. Or maybe it was the realization that David wasn't just cheating on me. He was disrespecting me, treating me like I was too naive or too stupid or too dependent to figure out what was happening in my own marriage. I heard his car in the driveway at 10:47. The front door opened quietly, the way it did when he was trying not to wake anyone. "Maya?" he called softly. "You awake?" "In the kitchen," I said. He appeared in the doorway, already loosening his tie. Still handsome. Still the man I'd fallen in love with. Still wearing cologne that smelled like flowers and betrayal. "How was your meeting?" I asked. Long. Frustrating. He kissed the top of my head as he passed. "Henderson's being impossible. We might lose the whole deal." "That's too bad." He opened the refrigerator and pulled out a beer. "How was your evening? What did you do?" "Had dinner. Watched some TV. Quiet night." "Good. You deserve quiet nights." He sat across from me at the table. "You work so hard with Marcus in the house. I know I haven't been around much lately." "Work's important," I said. "You're important too. You know that, right?" He reached across and covered my hand with his. "You and Marcus are the most important things in my life." I looked at our joined hands. His wedding ring caught the kitchen light, a circle of gold that was supposed to mean forever. "I know," I said. Another lie, but it was getting easier. "I should probably shower," he said, standing up. "I feel like I smell like the restaurant. We had dinner there before the meeting, and the place was full of smoke." Romano's was non-smoking, had been for years. "Okay," I said. "I'll be up in a few minutes." I listened to his footsteps on the stairs, heard the shower turn on. Then I sat alone in my kitchen and made a decision that surprised me with its clarity. I wasn't going to confront David. I wasn't going to scream or cry or beg for explanations. I wasn't going to give him the chance to make me feel crazy or paranoid or like I was overreacting. I was going to watch. I was going to learn. I was going to figure out exactly who I'd married and what I wanted to do about it. And I was going to protect Marcus from all of it. The next morning at breakfast, David was humming again. That light, happy tune that had nothing to do with Henderson deals or work stress. "Dad sounds happy," Marcus observed, stirring his cereal. "He does," I agreed. Maybe his meeting went better than he thought. Maybe. But I was watching David's face as he read his phone, watching the way he smiled at whatever message he was receiving, watching him type back quickly, his fingers moving with the kind of urgency reserved for important communications, or love letters. "I might be late again tonight," he said without looking up. "This Henderson thing is really heating up." "Another meeting?" "Yeah. Probably won't be home until after 10. It was Thursday. A new pattern, apparently." "That's fine," I said. "Marcus and I will find something fun to do." After David left for work and Marcus for school, I sat in my empty house and felt something shift inside me. The desperate need to know for certain. The burning desire to catch him in the act, to have proof that couldn't be explained away or dismissed. But also something else. Something calmer and colder. The realization that I already had enough proof. That I didn't need to see more receipts or follow him to more restaurants or catch them together to know the truth. David was having an affair with a beautiful blonde woman who made him feel young and exciting and free from the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood. A woman who didn't ask him to take out the trash or help with homework or remember to pick up milk on the way home. A woman who wasn't me. The question wasn't whether he was cheating anymore. The question was what I was going to do about it. I could fight for my marriage, demand counseling, insist on transparency, make him choose between his family and his fantasy. I could leave, pack up Marcus and move in with Jasmine while I figured out lawyers and custody arrangements and how to start over at 30. Or I could do something else entirely. I could wait. I could watch him think he was getting away with it. Let him believe I was the naive, trusting wife who didn't notice or didn't care. Let him get comfortable in his lies and careless with his secrets. And then I could choose the time and place and manner of my leaving. On my terms, not his. The idea felt dangerous and powerful and surprisingly satisfying. David thought I didn't matter. He thought I was nobody worth considering in his grand romance with his flower-scented mistress. He was about to learn how wrong he was. That evening, I made Marcus's favorite dinner, spaghetti and meatballs with garlic bread. We ate together at our small breakfast nook, just the two of us, while David presumably shared expensive wine with someone who sparkled in candlelight. "Mom," Marcus said, twirling pasta around his fork. "Do you miss Dad when he works late?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I miss him. The house feels different when he's not here." I thought about this. Did I miss David when he was gone? Or was I starting to feel relieved? "I miss the dad you remember," I said carefully. "The one who used to come home excited to tell us about his day." Marcus nodded solemnly. "He used to help me with my homework and read stories with funny voices. He did. Now he's always tired, or thinking about work, or thinking about someone else, I thought, but didn't say." "Sometimes people go through phases," I said instead. "Sometimes they have to figure out what's really important to them." "What's important to you, Mom?" The question was simple, but the answer felt enormous. "You," I said without hesitation, "making sure you're safe and happy and loved. Everything else is just details." Marcus smiled and went back to his spaghetti, satisfied with this answer. But I sat there thinking about my words. Everything else is just details, including my marriage, apparently, including David's promises and excuses and elaborate lies, including the beautiful woman with blonde hair who thought she'd won something precious. They were all just details compared to the serious business of raising my son and protecting his heart and showing him what real love looked like. Real love didn't lie. Real love didn't sneak around. Real love didn't make children feel crazy for telling the truth. Real love didn't treat the people who mattered most like they were nobody worth considering. And if David had forgotten what real love looked like, then it was time for me to remind him. Just not in the way he expected. 2 months later, I stood in my sister's kitchen watching Marcus color dinosaurs at her breakfast table. He'd adapted to our temporary living situation with the resilience that children somehow possess, turning upheaval into adventure. Jasmine's apartment had become our safe harbor, a place where I could breathe without calculating every word. The conversation that changed everything had been surprisingly quiet. It happened on a Saturday morning in early spring. David was in his office, supposedly working, but probably texting his flower-scented distraction. Marcus was at a playdate. I was folding laundry in our bedroom when I decided I was tired of pretending. I walked into his office and sat down across from his desk. He looked up from his computer with that distracted smile he'd perfected over the past months. "Hey, beautiful, what's up?" "I know about her," I said simply. The smile froze on his face. "Know about who?" "The woman with blonde hair who wears blue dresses and smells like flowers. The one you've been meeting at Romano's every Tuesday for the past 3 months. David's face went through a series of expressions: shock, denial, calculation, and finally something that looked almost like relief. "Maya, I'm not going to yell," I said calmly. "I'm not going to cry or beg or ask you to choose. I'm just going to tell you what's going to happen." He closed his laptop slowly. "Okay. I'm going to pack some things for Marcus and me. We're going to stay with Jasmine for a while. You can have the house and your Tuesday nights and whatever story you want to tell yourself about why your family left." "Wait." David stood up, his hands reaching toward me. Let me explain. It's not what you think. It's complicated. Is it? I stayed seated, my voice steady. Because it seems pretty simple to me. You're having an affair. You've been lying to me and making our son feel crazy for telling the truth. You think I'm nobody who matters. His face crumpled at those last words. I never said that. You said it to her, at Romano's, 3 weeks ago. The silence stretched between us. David sat back down heavily, his head in his hands. How long have you known? Since Marcus asked if he should tell me about her. Since you spilled coffee and lied to a 7-year-old's face. Maya, please, let me explain. It just happened. It doesn't mean anything. Stop. I stood up. Don't make this worse by insulting my intelligence. He looked up at me then, really looked. And I saw the moment he realized I wasn't the same woman who'd been making his favorite dinners while he planned his escape. What do you want? He asked quietly. I want you to be honest with yourself about what you've chosen. I want you to stop pretending this is something that just happened. And I want you to let Marcus and me go with some dignity. I don't want you to go. I love you, Maya. I love our family. The words should have hurt more than they did. Instead, I felt something like pity. You love the idea of us, the safety net we provide, the picture we make. I picked up his laptop and opened it. His email was still visible, including a message from someone named Catherine with a subject line that read, "Missing you already." But you don't love us enough to be faithful. You don't respect us enough to be honest. And you don't value us enough to put us first. David's shoulders sagged. She doesn't mean anything, Maya. It's just, David. My voice was firm but not unkind. Stop lying. To me and to yourself. I closed the laptop and looked at my husband. Really looked at him. Underneath the guilt and panic, I could see relief. The exhaustion of maintaining 2 lives, 2 sets of lies, 2 versions of himself. You want to be with her, I said. Maybe you don't want to admit it, but you do. You want the excitement and the newness and the feeling of being someone different than the man who argues about taking out the trash. He didn't deny it. So be with her. But don't ask me to wait around while you figure out if the grass is really greener. What about Marcus? This was the only question that mattered, and we both knew it. Marcus will be fine, because I'll make sure he's fine. He'll know he's loved and valued, and that none of this is his fault. I met David's eyes, and he'll learn that sometimes loving someone means walking away when they can't love you back the way you deserve. Now, 8 weeks later, I was learning that lesson myself. The transition hadn't been as hard as I'd expected. Marcus missed his father, but he'd adjusted to our new routine with surprising grace. We had dinner with Jasmine most nights. I'd taken on more substitute teaching assignments, slowly rebuilding the professional confidence I'd set aside for marriage and motherhood. And slowly, quietly, I was remembering who I used to be before I became David's wife. Mom, look. Marcus held up his latest dinosaur drawing. It's a family of T-Rexes, the mama and the baby. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Where's the daddy? Marcus considered this seriously. He's at work. He works a lot. Jasmine and I exchanged a look across the kitchen. My son was processing his new reality in the way children do. Honestly, and without the complicated emotions adults attach to everything. The mama looks happy, I observed. She is happy. She likes taking care of her baby. And look, he pointed to a smaller dinosaur he'd drawn in the corner. This is Aunt Jasmine Dinosaur. She helps with babysitting. I'm honored to be a dinosaur, Jasmine said with mock seriousness. My phone buzzed with a text. David again. He'd been messaging regularly since we left. Apologies, explanations, promises to change. I'd stopped reading most of them. This one was different. Marcus has a school presentation on Friday. I'd like to be there. I showed the message to Jasmine. She read it and raised an eyebrow. What do you think? I asked. I think it's not about what I think. What does Marcus want? I looked at my son, still focused on his dinosaurs. He'd mentioned the presentation, a show and tell about family traditions. He'd seemed excited about it, but he hadn't asked about his father attending. Marcus, I said gently, remember your presentation at school on Friday? Yeah, I'm going to talk about how we make pancakes on Sunday mornings. Would you like Dad to come watch? He looked up from his drawing, his little face serious. Will you be there too? Of course. And Aunt Jasmine? If she wants to come. Then okay, Dad can come too. Simple as that. No drama, no complicated feelings. Just a child who wanted the people he loved to see him do something important. I'll text him back, I said. But first, I walked to Jasmine's living room window and looked out at the busy street below. People walking dogs, couples holding hands, families heading home from dinner. Life continuing in all its messy, complicated glory. I thought about the woman with blonde hair, Catherine. I wondered if David had told her about us leaving, if she felt guilty or victorious or something more complicated. I wondered if she knew she'd inherited a man who was capable of making a 7-year-old feel crazy for telling the truth. But mostly, I didn't think about her at all anymore. She was part of David's story now, not mine. I texted back, Marcus would like you there. Presentation starts at 2 p.m. The response came quickly. Thank you. Maya, can we talk after? Please. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. We can talk. Because despite everything, David was still Marcus's father, and I was still the woman who'd chosen grace over bitterness, dignity over drama. Friday came with unusual spring warmth. I dressed carefully, not for David, but for myself. A blue dress that made me feel confident, earrings that caught the light, the kind of put-together look that reminded me I was more than just someone's ex-wife. Marcus wore his favorite dinosaur shirt and practiced his presentation in the car. First, I'll explain about the special pancake recipe Grandma taught you. Then I'll show the picture of us making them last week. Then I'll talk about how traditions make families feel connected even when things change. That sounds perfect, baby. The school parking lot felt like neutral territory. David was already there, leaning against his car in a way that looked casual, but felt calculated. He dressed carefully too, khakis and a button-down shirt that said devoted father instead of tech executive. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. Marcus ran to both of us with equal enthusiasm, bridging the awkward space between us with pure 7-year-old joy. David's eyes met mine over Marcus's head. Maya, you look really good. Thank you. We walked into the school together, maintaining careful distance. Other parents probably saw a normal family attending their child's presentation. They couldn't know about the months of lies, the Tuesday night betrayals, the quiet implosion that had brought us to this careful choreography. Marcus's presentation was perfect. He spoke clearly about Sunday morning pancakes, about mixing the batter and flipping them carefully, about how the tradition started with his great-grandmother and continued through the generations. Even when families change, he concluded, traditions help us remember what's important: love and taking care of each other and making special memories. The pride in his voice made my chest tight with emotion. My son understood something that had taken me 8 years to learn. After the presentation, Marcus hugged us both and ran off to play with friends. David and I stood in the hallway outside his classroom, surrounded by children's artwork and the comfortable chaos of elementary school life. He did great, David said. He did. Maya, Not here, I said quietly. There's a coffee shop 2 blocks away. Marcus's friend's mom can watch him for 20 minutes. The coffee shop was nearly empty in the mid-afternoon lull. We sat across from each other at a small table, and I felt the strange distance that had grown between us. Not anger or hurt anymore, just the vast space that separated people who no longer shared the same hopes. "I ended it," David said without preamble. I sipped my coffee and waited. "With Catherine. I ended it 2 weeks ago." "Okay." "I thought you should know. I thought maybe we could try again. For Marcus. For us." I studied his face. He looked tired, older somehow. The humming was gone, replaced by something heavier. "Why did you end it?" The question seemed to surprise him. "Because I realized I made a mistake. Because I want my family back." That's not what I asked. He was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "She wanted more than I could give. She wanted me to leave you and Marcus, to start over completely, when I couldn't promise that." He shrugged. "It got complicated. So you didn't choose to end it because you realized what you were doing was wrong. You ended it because she wanted something you weren't ready to give up." "Maya." "David, do you hear yourself? Even now you're making this about what was convenient for you." His shoulders sagged. "You're right. God, you're always right. I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to understand who you are, who you've been this whole time." We sat in silence for a moment. Through the window, I could see parents picking up their children, families heading home to homework and dinner, and the comfortable routines that held life together. "I miss you," he said finally. "I miss coming home to you and Marcus. I miss being part of something that mattered." "We always mattered, David. You just decided we didn't matter enough." He looked up at me then, and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not just guilt or regret, but recognition, understanding of what he'd thrown away and why. "Is there any chance?" he asked quietly. "For us?" I thought about his question seriously. I thought about the David I'd married, the one who'd defended me to his mother and read bedtime stories in funny voices. I thought about whether that man was still in there somewhere, buried under entitlement and lies, and the intoxication of secret romance. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know who you are anymore, and I don't know if I want to spend the time finding out." "What would it take? Counseling? Time? I'll do whatever you need." "It would take you figuring out why you did this. Really why. Not because it just happened or because you were flattered or because work was stressful. But why you thought it was okay to lie to me every day for months. Why you thought it was okay to make Marcus feel crazy for telling the truth." David winced at the mention of our son. "And it would take you understanding that this wasn't just about sex or excitement or whatever Catherine gave you that I didn't. This was about respect. About valuing your family enough to be honest, even when honesty was hard." I finished my coffee and checked my phone. Marcus would be wondering where we were. "I can't teach you how to respect me, David. That's something you either feel or you don't. I do respect you. I've always respected you." "No," I said gently. "You've always needed me. There's a difference." I stood up to leave, and he reached for my hand. "Maya, please, don't give up on us." I looked down at our joined hands. Once upon a time, his touch had felt like coming home. Now it just felt like a memory. "I'm not giving up on us," I said. "I'm choosing myself. I'm choosing peace. I'm choosing to show Marcus what it looks like when someone values themselves enough to walk away from something that doesn't serve them." I pulled my hand free gently. "I hope you find what you're looking for, David. I really do. But I hope you understand that it can't be me. Not anymore." 3 months later, I stood in my new apartment's kitchen making Sunday morning pancakes with Marcus. It was smaller than our old house, but the morning light was perfect, and the laughter was genuine. "Mom, you're humming," Marcus observed, stirring the batter carefully. "Am I?" "Yeah, you hum a lot now. Happy humming." I thought about this as I heated the pan. When had I started humming again? Somewhere between leaving and landing, between grieving and healing, I'd found my voice again. "What do you think about that?" I asked. "I like it. It sounds like you. Like me. Not like David's wife or Marcus's mother or someone trying to be perfect for people who didn't appreciate the effort. Just like me." "Good," I said, flipping our first pancake. "Because I like it too." My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Dinner tonight? I'm making that pasta you love." Another from my principal. "We have a full-time position opening up in the fall. Interested?" And one from David. "Saw Marcus's art show photos on social media. He looks happy. You both do." I read that last one twice. No requests for another chance, no promises to change. No guilt trips about breaking up our family. Just an acknowledgement that we were okay without him. Maybe better than okay. I put my phone away and focused on the pancakes, on the morning light, on my son's chatter about his upcoming field trip to the Science Museum. This was my life now. Smaller in some ways, bigger in others, free from the exhausting work of loving someone who couldn't love me back the way I deserved. Some mornings, I thought about David. About whether he'd learned anything from losing us. About whether Catherine had been worth what he'd given up. About whether he ever woke up missing the sound of genuine laughter in his house. But mostly, I thought about the future, about the full-time teaching position, and the apartment with better light, and the man who might someday love me without conditions or compromises. About showing Marcus what it looked like to choose yourself when choosing yourself was the hardest and healthiest thing you could do. "These are perfect, Mom," Marcus said, cutting his pancakes into careful dinosaur shapes. "They are," I agreed, and realized I was talking about more than breakfast. Outside my window, the world went about its business. Couples walking dogs, families heading to weekend activities, people living their complicated, imperfect lives. And inside my small, bright kitchen, my son and I made pancakes and planned our day and hummed together in the kind of harmony that only came from being exactly where you belonged. Some mornings, David drove past my building on his way to whatever life he'd chosen instead of ours. I never saw him, but I imagined him looking up at my windows, wondering what we were doing, whether we missed him. I hoped he could see that we were happy. Not happy in spite of his absence, but happy because we'd finally learned what we deserved. And that was enough. More than enough. That was everything.